We are calling ourselves informed parents of Rocklin locally and advocates for families and children to a broader audience. We exist to expose the sexualization of children in California's public schools. We discuss 3 areas of concern. First is comprehensive sexuality education, then history and social sciences, and recent updates to the health education framework. We start our presentation with a warning that it contains sexually graphic material, that it is not intended for children, and we apologize in advance for the explicitness of the content. Comprehensive sexuality education will encompass the first portion of our presentation. Assembly Bill 329, also known as the California Healthy Youth Act, was authored by Assemblywoman Shirley Weber and signed into law in 2015. It requires schools to teach comprehensive sexuality education, also known as CSE, at least twice, once in junior high and once in high school. The California Department of Education strongly recommends teaching CSE in grades K through 6th. AB 329 mandates that instruction must affirmatively recognize that people have different sexual orientations and must be inclusive of same-sex relationships. It must teach about gender, gender expression, gender identity, and explore the harms of negative gender stereotypes. So do students need sex ed? Yes. Yes, we believe that our children should learn about their bodies. And yes, we believe our children should know how to protect themselves from sexually transmitted diseases. But do they need all of this? The new sex ed consists of up to 13 45-minute lessons without separating boys and girls, focuses on sexual pleasure, not on reproduction, introduces anal and oral sex for minors, promotes and encourages exploration of and experimentation with gender identity and sexual orientation. It teaches minors how to give and receive sexual consent and encourages students to engage in risky sexual behavior. Next, we have state-approved and most widely adopted comprehensive sexuality education curricula. Be Real, Be Ready, Teen Talk, Rights, Respect, Responsibility, and Positive Prevention Plus. These are the 4 CSE curricula that we see most commonly used by districts throughout the state. This is a sample lesson from Positive Prevention Plus for 7th grade. These images are from a workbook that is given to students. This is something that they would be able to take home. It is used by most districts in our area and by most districts in Northern California. Here we have a middle school lesson on HIV transmission. In this lesson, each student would receive 1 card, either a green body opening card or a blue body fluid card. In this lesson, a girl perhaps would have a card with the word penis on it. A boy would have a card perhaps with rectal fluid, and they would match up and discuss whether or not their combination of cards would or would not transmit HIV. We are learning from both teachers and students that in lessons like these, in which students are paired off and instructed to discuss very intimate topics, some students are seizing the opportunity to be vulgar. It is essentially inviting those kids to practice discussions that would, in most workplace environments, be considered sexual harassment. This is a gender activity that would typically be taught to 7th graders. Teachers are asked to display this graphic of the genderbread person to help explain that gender, identity, and sex do not always match. Teachers would then display the gender spectrum slide and instruct students to stand up, turn around twice, and sit down again. Then have the students imagine that each were a different gender, gender identity, or sexual orientation than they currently are. Practically, this could be a 12-year-old girl imagining what it would feel like to be a gay man, or a boy considering how he would feel as a lesbian. These images, the genderbread person and the gender unicorn, are commonly used to promote the ever-expanding spectrum of gender theory. Clearly, they are targeted to children. This video is from the independent study version of the high school program from Positive Prevention Plus. We do see these characters embedded in videos throughout the rest of the curriculum.
I'm Dulce, and I just got my driver's license. Yippee! I grew up in Southern California, but I have a lot of family in Mexico. Sometimes I like speaking Spanish with my grandmother, mi abuelita. I'm not dating anyone right now, and I'm open to going out with guys and girls. Why limit your options to just one gender?
All CSE curricula emphasize a student's right to leave campus for medical services without parental consent. This graphic is a teacher slide that a teacher would display in front of the classroom. The bottom, you'll notice it says to locate a clinic, visit familypact.org or text the word clinic and your zip code to the number 877-877. This is the teacher lesson plan, which accompanies the slide shown previously. The lesson is on accessing contraception and locating family planning services. Again, this is a resource which asks students to text the word clinic and their zip code to that 877 number. As a parent of a middle schooler who would be receiving this information from their teacher, I went ahead and followed that instruction to find out what this number would be sending to my child. I texted the word clinic to this resource called Hookup, which is authored by an organization, teensource.org. I also sent my zip code, and of course, the first clinic that it sent me to was Planned Parenthood. Notice there are 4 clinics listed here. I know for a fact that there is a pro-life clinic that is about 0.2 of a mile from this Planned Parenthood, but you'll notice this is not listed as an option, even though they provide most of the same services. This page is directly from the student workbook for Positive Prevention Plus. It's the same for middle school and for high schoolers. You'll notice at the top, the very first resource listed is Advocates for Youth. This is content from their webpage. Teen Source is again responsible for Hookup. They would like our teenagers to get weekly sex info and life advice sent to them via their cell phone. We're particularly concerned about another resource that is listed, this one in the middle, called Afraid to Ask. This is content from the Afraid to Ask website. It gives a warning. It says by entering our site, you agree that you are either an adult or have a parent or guardian's permission to view the explicit information and images on the internet. It also says in no way should afraidtoask.com site or online guides be considered as offering medical advice. So they're giving a disclaimer to our kids that it is not reliable medical advice. However, they are also clearly showing a very, very graphic visual of a woman. We have asked teachers who are giving these resources to our students if they know the content that is listed on these websites, and most of them say no. They haven't even done their research, yet they're freely giving this to our kids. Of course, there are bits and pieces of these lessons that are valuable. This page is, again, from the student workbook. It tells students not to visit pornographic websites, tells them that it is against the law to sext, and that they could face criminal charges for sending explicit messages or images by cell phone. Clearly, based on the previous image, there is inconsistency in the curricula's message. I continue to receive weekly texts from Hookup, authored by Teen Source. Hookup aggressively advises kids to get free condoms. Again, as the parent of a middle school student, I followed a link in one of these texts and was sent to the following video. This video is from a YouTube channel hosted by amaze.org. Amaze is a collaboration between experts in the field of sex education, including Advocates for Youth. They are the group responsible for the condom flag and also the organization that is listed first in the student workbook of state-approved resources for students.
Okay, so we have regular size, extra large, latex-free, thin feel, intense feel, okay, strawberry wait a minute, why do they need a strawberry flavor balloon? Someday, what may seem unbelievable now will likely happen. Someone will agree to have sex with you. Congratulations! So, if you're lucky enough, the first time you have sex won't be the last. Remember to always be responsible, protect your health and that of your partner, and always use a condom.
Following images are from Advocates for Youth's Instagram page. Again, this is the resource listed first in the student workbook. We found these images to be particularly disturbing. Clearly, they are targeted towards children. Aladdin's hashtag says rub that lamp. You'll notice that both of these images have a hashtag that says Disney. Snow White, whose apple has been replaced with a banana covered in a condom, has a description that says, "Someday my prince will come and I will be prepared." Again, the definition of pornography is pictures or writing describing sexual behavior intended to cause sexual excitement. Are these images pornographic? Are the authors of these curricula sexting our children and sending them pornography? This is a 5th grade lesson from Rights, Respect, Responsibility. It says, it is important to remember that someone can have a penis even if they don't identify as a boy, or a vulva if they don't identify as a girl. Also from Rights, Respect, and Responsibility, this middle school lesson asks students to name at least 3 different sexual orientations. It tells 12-year-olds that instead of saying girl or woman, they should use the phrase someone with a vulva to make it more inclusive. This lesson is from the curriculum Teen Talk. It's written by an organization called Health Connected out of San Francisco. In this lesson, again for middle schoolers, teachers are to ask for 2 volunteers to act out a scene of a teen visiting a clinic. They are to ask, how could you get to one of these clinics? Write directions from your house to the clinic. This is a middle school activity from Teen Talk. It's a condom demonstration. It says we will learn the proper steps to using a condom with a condom training model and a real condom. So 12 and 13-year-old boys and girls together would be practicing these in small groups. Here we have a condom negotiation skills practice lesson from Positive Prevention Plus. Again, this is a middle school lesson. It asks students to break into pairs. It says to ask each student to practice condom negotiation with their partner. We want to bring to your attention all of these lessons in which students pair up. It would be very difficult for a teacher to monitor all of the conversations taking place during condom negotiation practice. Is this a good idea? There's a wide range of maturity levels in this age group. Again, we're talking about 11, 12, 13-year-olds. And teachers cannot possibly monitor all of the conversations taking place in these paired off lessons. This is a middle school activity. It says we will learn the proper steps to using an insertive condom with a female pelvic model and a real insertive condom. It also says sometimes they are called female condoms. However, since they can go inside an anus and everyone has an anus, we will refer to them as insertive condoms. This lesson is about lubrication. It's again from Teen Talk. It asks for 2 volunteers from the class to blow up a condom and compare what the best type of lubrication is to use with condoms. Again, these are the faces of 11, 12, 13-year-old students. Please understand that the reason CSE discusses lubrication is because it is required for anal sex. Anal sex is about pleasure and not reproduction. Medical professionals will tell you that the risk of disease transmission through anal sex is much higher. Additionally, there is no FDA-approved condom for anal sex. It is risky behavior, and CSE does not emphasize the harm of this behavior. These 2 graphics are from an organization called the Adolescent Health Working Group. They are the authors of Be Real, Be Ready. They talk about sex toys. It says remember to put on a new condom when you're done using a toy and you want to share it with a partner, or when you're going from one hole to another, especially from the anus to the vagina. It says to use only toys that are flared at the bottom for anal sex. This way it won't get stuck. Then the red arrow says, what if you don't have time or money to buy sex toys? Cucumbers, carrots, and bananas with the peel make great dildos. Just remember to use a condom. And then again, we have more description about lubrication, whether makes it better. Lube can make condom use more pleasurable for both partners. Again, we're talking about pleasure, not about reproduction. Again, it gives the different kinds of lubrication that are required for the different types of sex. And on the bottom right-hand side, it says, if you forgot to pick up the lube, use plenty of saliva, spit. It's free and always available. This is a sample from a lesson from Rights, Respect, Responsibility. It says to tell students that dental dams are flavored because they are designed specifically for safer oral sex. Once again, we see that CSE is encouraging our students, our minors, to focus on their sexual pleasure. The purpose of these graphic lessons is to desensitize children of their natural and innate sense of modesty. The intent is to lower their inhibitions, not just to teach them how to protect themselves. Are we teaching children to ignore their conscience? Is this education even effective? While HIV rates are fortunately trending down, chlamydia, gonorrhea, and syphilis rates are on the rise quite dramatically. There is good news. According to the CDC's National Center for Health Statistics, only 3.1% of California high school students reported being sexually active before the age of 13. Most teens are waiting to have sex. The majority of teens have not even had sexual intercourse. Sadly, the majority of those who have engaged in intercourse wish they had waited. So what can parents do? They can opt out. For now, in the state of California, this is the easiest way to make effective change. If the majority of students opt out, districts and the state will not be able to ignore that parents and students do not want this curricula. Here we like to give parents very practical options about opting out. It is required via written notification. The schools are required to give parents at least 14 days notice. They are required to tell parents exactly who will be teaching CSE. We encourage parents, if they do opt out of CSE, to find alternative sexual health resources that are best suited to their own families. An alternative to CSE is sexual risk avoidance education. Sexual risk avoidance education is not abstinence-only education. That's a fallacy. It teaches students to avoid the risks of engaging in sex. It encourages self-regulation and self-restraint, helps students to build healthy relationships, and teaches that delaying sex until in a long-term monogamous relationship with an uninfected partner, such as marriage, is the healthiest choice. One SRA program that is available to parents in California is through the California Youth Partnership. Another organization called United Parents has recently finished the Heart curriculum for junior high, and they are in the process of finishing it for high school. We give some bullet points on the positive aspects of the Heart curriculum. So what can parents do? They can opt out of sex ed, they can sit out, and they can vote out.
SB 48 was passed in 2011, and this law requires schools to include the historical contributions of LGBT Americans. And we agree that anyone who has made a significant contribution to society should, of course, be included in our history books. Our concern is that the textbooks introduce the complex topic of sexuality to students as young as 6 years old. And here we provide you the Ed Code, and as you can see, the law does not specify how the content is covered or at which grade levels. The law does not require the sexual orientation of historical figures to be introduced in second grade. The framework, however, suggests it. So we want to talk about law versus framework. Law is law. It's mandatory, it's binding, it's written and approved by lawmakers. Framework, on the other hand, is written and approved by appointed officials, education professionals, and advocacy groups. It's not mandatory, it's just a suggestion. Framework is written to help districts, schools, and teachers implement the subject standards. So the way this works, law is passed, framework is then written, that framework is taken to publishers, publishers write curriculum, and that curriculum ends up on our children's desks. And typically, the state of California only approves curricula that follow the framework. And again, the framework is a suggestion, not the law. Here from the CDE Ed Code, it says, notice that the guidance in the History Social Science framework is not binding on local educational agencies. The document is exemplary and compliance with it is not mandatory. Districts and teachers have broad authority and discretion to decide how to comply with SB 48. Districts are not required to choose curriculum approved by the state. This is directly from the CDE website. It says it is up to local districts to determine how the instructional content is included. It falls to the teacher and the local school and district administration to determine how the content is covered and at which grade levels. So these are the State Board of Education adopted curricula that we see most often. This is for K through 5. We have McGraw-Hill, Studies Weekly, Pearson, and TCI. And we believe that the content in these state-approved curricula extend beyond what is required by the law. We will share some examples now. This is from Pearson, first grade. Gavin Newsom is a champion for people's rights. Gavin said that people could marry who they choose. Sometimes Gavin helped marry people. Some marriages were not between a man and a woman. He made sure that people's rights were respected. Here we have Pearson again for second grade. Jose Julio Saria, he told people he was gay and that sometimes he dressed as a woman. Again, these are the faces of second graders. Again in Pearson, in the same section, the teacher, this is a teacher manual, the teacher is instructed to say, although Saria was not elected, how was he a hero to the gay community? And then we have this activity here where the kids are directed to create a pride flag. It says, discuss with children that being proud of and comfortable with oneself can help a person be honest and confident in who they are. Introduce children to the symbolism in the LGBT pride flag. This is from Studies Weekly, second grade. On the left, we have Alan Turing. Alan was gay. In the 1950s, that was a crime in the United Kingdom. Alan was told he was a criminal. On the right, we have Sally Ride. It says she joined NASA and became the first female and first lesbian American astronaut. And our question is, how will teachers explain to 7- and 8-year-olds what gay or lesbian means without mentioning sexuality? Will teachers give these 7-year-olds an accurate definition? The definition is sexually attracted to people of one's own sex. Are teachers going to be talking to our 7-year-olds about sexual attraction, or will they give a more age-appropriate but less accurate definition? Some schools want teachers to define it something like two people of the same gender who love each other. But unfortunately, this is inaccurate. A person does not have to be in love to be gay. The fact is that it's about sexual attraction, who you are attracted to, not who you love. And we are concerned that this may be confusing for our young children of this age. What about first and second grade girls who love each other and think boys are gross? Are they lesbians? Will they wonder that because of this definition? This is a very complex topic that we shouldn't be expecting our 7-year-old children to have to navigate through. Here we have another example from Studies Weekly in second grade. Harvey Milk. He was one of the first openly gay Americans to hold an important office. And it's a well-known fact that at age 33, Harvey Milk had a sexual relationship with a 16-year-old boy. Based on current penal code, he would have been required to register as a sex offender. Also, it says here, some people disagreed with Harvey's views and his beliefs on equal rights for gay people and others. One such person shot and killed Harvey in 1978. And actually, he was assassinated over political issues, not because he was gay.
This had nothing to do with anybody's sexual orientation. It had to do with getting back his position. Dan White was a troubled man.
Here is another example of Pearson for third grade. Here in Pearson, they go ahead and define for us what gay means. It says gay men are attracted to other men. They also define lesbian, bisexual, and transgender. They mention Chaz Bono here. He is a transgender activist. This is a teacher manual. It asks the teachers to pose this question to the kids. Why is it important for people to advocate for those who are gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgendered? And then it has this activity. It says divide students into small groups and assign each group one of the individuals in this section. Have them prepare a speech advocating on behalf of that person's cause. So the individuals that they are talking about from this section are Harvey Milk, Chaz Bono, Annette Funicello, and Victoria Kolowski. We've already talked about Harvey Milk and Chaz Bono. Victoria was a transgender person in office, and Annette Funicello is disabled. So they're going to take our 8-year-olds and divide them into groups. One group will be assigned to Harvey Milk and be asked to write a speech advocating for his cause, which is gay rights. Another group will be assigned to Chaz Bono and be asked to write a speech advocating for his cause, which, he is a transgender activist, of course. So this is a great example of how the textbooks go above and beyond what the law requires. The law does not require advocacy, only inclusion. In the same section, it references the Mattachine Society, and the Mattachine Society was founded by Harry Hay, who was an active supporter of NAMBLA, which is the North American Man-Boy Love Association. It is a pedophile advocacy organization. We have a quote here from 11th grade history framework where they mention people like Alfred Kinsey and Harry Hay, and they are suggesting that for 11th grade. I suggest if you have the stomach for it, go ahead and research Kinsey and Hay on your own. Here we have Studies Weekly again for 4th grade. In 4th grade, they start talking about specific court cases. And we say, despite the court's decisions, gay marriage remains a controversial issue. The right to hold a personal religious conviction that marriage is only between a man and a woman is protected by the Constitution. Does this present both sides of this sensitive issue? Here in Studies Weekly again, this is 5th grade. Here they equate Harvey Milk to Martin Luther King. They both lost their lives because of what they believed. Here we have Abigail Adams in 5th grade, and this says, as society changes, the Constitution may change too. Today's issues still include segregation, but also same-sex marriage, gender identity, and reproductive rights. What will the next constitutional amendment be? So will some of our teachers take this opportunity to talk to our 10-year-olds about reproductive rights? Here, Studies Weekly again for 5th grade. We have Billie Jean King. This first sentence says, just as our founding fathers took a chance and spoke out, Billie Jean King has done the same. Now, although we believe that she was a phenomenal athlete, are her contributions equivalent to those of the founding fathers? We actually found an alternative curriculum for history. It's called Teacher Created Materials, and TCM, not to be confused with TCI, complies with the FAIR Act by including the contributions of LGBTQ historical figures without focusing on their sexual orientation. We presented this to our district. The first thing they said was that it would be illegal for them to use this. We then explained that we knew of 15 districts throughout the state that had already adopted TCM, and that was back in April 2019. When we told our district that, they then came back and said that it was not rigorous enough for our district. And we did a little bit more research and found out that one district that is using this actually has higher test scores than ours. Our curriculum expert reviewed TCM, and listed here are the many reasons why it is in fact a viable option. Here we wanted to show you an example from TCM. Here we have Sally Ride. It talks about her wonderful contributions, but does not focus on her sexuality. It is important to understand the role of a school board. School boards are elected by the community to ensure that the district is responsive to the values, beliefs, and priorities of the community. A school board is not required to adopt state-approved curriculum. Districts can choose any curriculum provided it is FAIR Act compliant. Many districts have not yet adopted new history curriculum. Here are some suggestions for parents in those districts. And if your school district has already adopted new history social studies curriculum, these suggestions are for you. Opt out, sit out, vote out. On May 1st, 2019, our school board voted 3-2 to adopt K-5 Studies Weekly curriculum, even though 84% of district parents who addressed the board spoke out against the adoption. 2 days later, we conducted a district-wide sit-out in which approximately 1,000 students stayed home in protest of the board's decision. And keep in mind, there are approximately 12,000 students in our district, so these numbers are significant.
And now we're going to turn our attention to the health education framework that was adopted in May of 2019. The framework is a guide. It helps support the implementation of lessons that are tied to the California health education standards that were written in 2008. To put this into perspective, the law is what needs to be taught. The framework is the how. How do we teach it? The framework offers lessons, scripts, supplemental readings, and resources. The curriculum is developed using the framework as a guide. The districts will then choose the curriculum for the classrooms. It's up to our local school districts on how to use the framework. Remember, the framework is suggested, not mandated. The health education framework encompasses several subject matters, including ideas about gender identity, sexual orientation. It introduces the topic of spiritual abuse and compels speech by introducing appropriate usage of preferred pronouns. We will dive deeper as the slideshow continues. Remember, the framework is a suggestion on how to teach the health standards. The framework offers resource books in order to help teach the concepts. The resource books listed in the 2019 Health Framework were chosen with input from the ACLU, the Planned Parenthood affiliates of California, and the California Latinas for Reproductive Justice. Due to the efforts of informed parents, some of the proposed resource books were removed. It's interesting to note the response of a California State Board of Education member, Felisa Ortiz-Licon. Quote, "It's important to know the board is not trying to ban books. We're not saying that the books are bad, but the removal will help avoid the misunderstanding that California is mandating the use of these books." Although some of these books have been removed from the framework as resources, we are still sharing them with you to help you understand what the Department of Education finds appropriate for use in our classrooms. Throughout the rest of the slideshow, we have provided color-coded icons to help you see which books have been removed. However, it's important to note that even though a book was removed, students are just a few clicks away of still accessing the information. For example, An approved worksheet that the district uses provides a web address. From that point, the student will be linked to, you guessed it, books that were removed. So even though it has been removed, students will still have access to it. It's important to note that school libraries and classroom libraries still can house these books. Originally, this was a suggested resource by the Department of Education. Though it was removed, remember, teachers still can have it in their classroom and the school library. Here, kindergartners are being taught that they could have a gender identity that is different from their sex assigned at birth. In the past, teachers have done a great job of breaking down occupational stereotypes, talking about male nurses, female doctors, female firefighters. The framework suggests in Chapter 3 that the teacher should bring a transgender citizen into the lower elementary grades for a discussion. The idea of giving consent is interwoven throughout the kindergarten through 12th grade framework. Quote, "It is also important to explain that appropriate and inappropriate touching has to do with how someone feels, whether the touch feels comfortable or uncomfortable." We will see in a second why this is extremely concerning. Informed parents of Rocklin have actually spoken with law enforcement officers. Law enforcement and mental health professionals say that pedophiles use these exact words about consent to groom children by lowering their inhibitions and normalizing uncomfortable behavior. In the framework, Chapter 4, page 62, it says, "Educators create an environment that is inclusive and challenges binary concepts about gender." From the book, Who Are You?, first graders are introduced to the words gender queer, neutral, third gender, and two-spirit. So the framework offers suggestions on how to teach something. For third graders, they're expected to write short reports, and the framework suggested a reading from this book, and here's an excerpt. "This is when the man lies very close to the woman and puts his erect penis inside her vagina." Remember, third grade are 8-year-olds. Even though this book has been taken off of the list of suggested resources, remember, it still could end up in your child's hands, where they're going to see illustrations of sperm going into the vagina and a whole page dedicated to discussing erections. And here we are in third grade. It's important to note this book, It's Not the Stork, is still on the recommended reading list. Students will see quotes such as this: "The man's penis goes inside the woman's vagina," and the term "having sex." Remember, third graders are 8-year-olds. There are 9 chapters in the health framework, and there's 842 mentions of the word sex, sexual, and sexuality. We're still referring to the book, It's Not the Stork. The framework says gender doesn't always match biology. In the classroom, we may use the term female reproductive organs, but some people who identify as male have these organs. Moving on to 5th grade. The framework states teachers should use gender-neutral language, replacing the pronouns he or she with the pronouns they. Here we have 5th grade girls being introduced to what the G-spot is. It is recommended that there not be separation of genders during health instruction. Here, students are sitting side by side being introduced to slang terms that can only be regarded as vulgar and degrading. In this book that is targeted for boys, some boys learn about masturbation from other boys. Some boys even experiment by masturbating together. It also goes on to say, many boys engage in some form of what we call sex play with other boys as they're growing up. How does it feel like to have an orgasm? This book almost reads as if it's an advertisement. There's just no words to describe it. It's not something you can explain. Well, thank goodness Will, age 46, has some insight for our 10-year-olds. This book, entitled Sex is a Funny Word, is still on the resource page. In this suggested resource, Sex is a Funny Word, please pay attention to the header called Touching Yourself. Here we see a student masturbating in the bathtub. A lesson from the framework suggests that the teacher have a question box in her classroom in order to initiate dialogue. The suggestion is to read from a book such as this, Sex, Puberty, and All That Stuff, that is a current suggested resource. Here are some excerpts from the book. The thrill they feel when they discover how good getting an erection and coming can feel. As well as having a crush on someone of the same sex, we can also feel strong emotions for our friends. Sometimes these emotions have a physical side to them too. Boys might get erections when they are with other boys, or they might explore masturbation together, and girls might want to kiss or cuddle other girls. The question one might have when reading this approved resource is this actually health education or pornography? On the left-hand side, it talks about female masturbation. On the right-hand side, it talks about mutual masturbation and oral sex. We're now moving on to grades 7 and 8, where role-play lessons are encouraged. The framework suggests that teachers encourage students to act out vignettes. You can see highlighted some examples of the vignettes. Now remember in first grade, learning to ask for and give consent, they were taught to determine if the touch felt comfortable or uncomfortable. In the first one, two students are at a party. One asks the other for oral sex. Now remember, in the 5th grade book, based on what our good friend Will said, if it feels good, it's okay. So therefore, have we taught our students to consent? Here we have a sexual exposure chart showing that if you have one partner, you're exposed to one person. However, if you have 5 partners, it's as if you've been exposed to 31 partners. The framework encourages teachers to respect that students may have multiple sex partners. And when referring to partner, they should use the plural form, partners. However, is the message being sent how numbers can grow exponentially and how dangerous this can actually be? What is spiritual abuse? Examples for spiritual abuse include insisting on rigid gender roles. Now, in the dictionary, rigid means not able to be changed or adapted. So is accepting binary concepts of gender spiritual abuse? Religious boundaries of gender roles or delaying sexual activity would be viewed as spiritual abuse according to the framework. This spiritual abuse would be grouped with the likes of physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. Let's move on to high school. The next few slides show excerpts from the book that originally the Department of Education found reasonable to share with students as young as 14. Originally, they suggested it be a school-wide read. Let's take a look at the table of contents from this book. How do you masturbate? Mutual masturbation, BDSM, sadomasochism, body fluid or blood play, sex toys. As we look through this book, we notice that not only does it define what it is, but it tells how to do it. Over on the left side, we see sexual dominance and submission. Over on the right, a topic about sex toys. It says how sex toys can't be purchased by minors, but how household objects can be used as toys. And on the left-hand side, we see anal sex. What is it and how to do it? On the right-hand side, they do have a snippet about anti-abortion. Now remember, as Courtney pointed out, students have already learned about abortion, how to get one, how they can leave school without their parents' consent or knowledge. They're given addresses on where to go. But here's what they had to say about anti-abortion. Anti-abortion and anti-choice publications, organizations, individuals, and in-person places like crisis pregnancy centers, which are fake clinics that exist only to create intentional misinformation, fear, and guilt, and to talk people out of abortion, often have a particular easy time being shady online. Based on this presentation, we ask the question, does the Department of Education have our children's best interest at heart? Remember, the framework is to guide curriculum development. So, based on the books that were originally suggested and that are still on the list, in what direction was the Department of Education guiding the subject of health? Can I opt out? If any part of a school's instruction in health conflicts with the religious training and beliefs of a parent or guardian of a pupil, the pupil, upon written request of the parent or guardian, shall be excused from the part of the instruction that conflicts with the religious training and beliefs. However, in the framework, Chapter 6, page 27, encourages that health standards be integrated with English language arts and literacy. For example, teachers are told to research current events related to sexual health. On page 28, the health teacher should partner with the theater arts program and create plays based on abortion or adoption. So even though you opt out, the content can still come up in other curricular areas. What can you do? The best thing you can do is to become aware and stay informed. Find out which health curriculum is currently being utilized in your school. Ask if it's a graduation requirement. Note, it is currently not a state requirement. Make sure you are being notified when sensitive topics are being taught. Most of all, don't give up your privilege of parenting. Unfortunately, there have been cases where rights have been infringed upon. If you feel your parental rights or your child's rights have been violated in the classroom, then file a uniform complaint procedure with the district. Contact us, Informed Parents of Rocklin, to put you in touch with attorneys who want to hear your story. You have been informed about the 3 areas of history and social science, the comprehensive sexuality education, and the health framework. We have highlighted the concerns of what is being taught in our classrooms. What can you do? Opt out, sit out, vote out. Currently, we question if the Department of Education is respecting our rights as parents and adhering to what is developmentally appropriate for our students. We ask that your voice be heard.
We are calling ourselves Informed Parents of Rocklin locally and advocates for families and children to a broader audience.